Welcome to Talent Talks, the podcast where your host, Dan Maisie, dives into hiring's ins and outs. Our goal is to reveal how to attract top talent. Through interviews with leaders in sports, media and entertainment, we explore job search and recruitment trends, offer interview tips and strategies to differentiate yourself and uncover their hiring insights. Whether you're prepping for an interview or interested in hiring trends, Talent Talks is your essential resource. Let's dive in. Hello, as always, we're diving into the ever-evolving world of recruitment and talent strategy, and who better to guide us through today than Mark Gaitskell. As the Chief Executive of the Wycombe Wanderers Foundation, Mark has leveraged football's power for social good across the globe, from South Africa to Malaysia and the USA, culminated in an impactful 11-year journey in the UAE. His story is one of passion, strategic vision and unwavering belief in sport as a catalyst for positive change. With the coaching foundation, first at Southampton and then at Fulham, Mark's career has engaged with aspiring players and coaches throughout the world. Now, with a master's degree in sports directorship under his belt and a role as a non-executive director at the Royal Air Force FA, Mark brings a wealth of international experience and a deep commitment to community development and empowerment. Join us as we explore insights from his journey, the challenges and triumphs of leadership in the sports industry, and why leading with empathy is such a key facet in creating a successful business. Mark, welcome to Talent Talks.
Hi, Dan. That might be the best intro I've ever had. We can do this again.
Oh, don't worry. I said to a previous guest that they can have it for their LinkedIn, and the same applies. Don't worry. You can put it on the wall of your office.
Yeah, I might quote you.
Look, so let's get straight into it. We ask each of our guests the same question to begin with. What are your experiences of hiring and being hired, and what are your lessons learned?
Oh, it's a big, broad question. And the immediate word that comes to mind is mixed, a mixed bag. I've sat on both sides of the table on a number of occasions. And I guess with my career in sport sort of beginning in the coaching arena and being a mere mortal of a non-ex-professional football player. So I graduated university and I felt a pretty strong CV at that point. For my age, from a coaching perspective, I'd coached in the academy of two fantastic Premier League clubs, Southampton and Fulham, who were Premier League clubs and had kind of gone down and faced challenges within the time when I was there. But I'd found securing a full-time position in football once I finished really challenging, really difficult. I was getting close, but not quite close enough. And it felt like almost an unpenetrable brick wall I was up against to try to get, the dream job at that point. I was 23, 24. So, and I'd coached in various places. You rightly mentioned I'd been fortunate to go and deliver and work in the States and on a Premier League project in Malaysia, which was an amazing experience. I spent a month at the World Cup in South Africa working with the Football Foundation over there. And so it whetted my appetite to go abroad. And I guess the great example of that was 2 weeks I received a phone call and 2 weeks later I was in the Middle East in a role. So you'd gone from two ends of the spectrum, really. I'd been fighting and battling to try to secure the role I wanted in the sector here. And then I'd made that decision to go far and wide internationally, and quite the opposite, a process that was a couple of phone calls, to be honest, a chat, and off I went to a place that I didn't really know that much about.
And do you think there's a difference there between the approach to recruitment over here in the UK, European approach to recruitment, and out in the UAE? Was it a bit of a right time, right place type opportunity, or why do you think there was such a difference between the recruitment processes between the two?
Very different markets. Obviously, at the point when I went over there, the UAE was very much an emerging market. I actually hadn't heard of the UAE. I thought Dubai was a country. Showing my geography skills at the time. And like I said, I didn't know much about it, but off I went. Yeah, just a young, emerging market with what I realised quite quickly, huge potential, huge challenges as well in terms of some of the processes that you'd faced over there, much more complex, much more dynamic in terms of you're dealing with lots of different bodies because you need to secure visa sponsorships, and then you've got to work with the sporting governing bodies, and there are labour laws, and there's lots more to it. But there was just so much opportunity as well. So I think I realised at the time some of the barriers that I'd faced here were quite the opposite over there, and a good example being I'd gone into this business and been asked to lead it quite early on, and we built it from the ground really. And sort of about 6 months in, my backers behind me sort of gave me the opportunity to develop a facility. So quite similar and common over here, where sometimes schools might give up a little bit of their land to sports facilities to build pitches, and then they share the usage. We did the same with a private school over there, and we built a swimming pool, which I can tell you is not just a hole in the wall with water in it, a football pitch and a multi-purpose court. And I project led that. Now, I had absolutely no experience in construction, project management, any of the things that you'd have thought I would have needed to. And had that been the case in the UK, I wouldn't have even got close to managing that project. Yeah. But, I was leading a business. I was getting an opportunity to show what I could do, showcase my skills, my ability. And they were, Mark's got a bit of common sense. He seems to know what he's doing. Let's do it. Well, you manage it. You'll be fine. I was like, oh, okay, great. So sure enough, I took on the build of a facility and I felt like I did quite a good job, considering there's often delays to construction in that part of the world, and we pretty much delivered on time and extremely complex projects, particularly the swimming pool, I have to say. And what an unbelievable learning experience for me. So I took a lot from that. So two very different landscapes and barriers to opportunity, I would say.
I want to come back to your time in the UAE if we've got time a bit later on. But when you came back to the UK and came back into this market, did the barriers that you had 11 years ago, 12 years ago, did they still exist? Did you still have the same issues when you came back as to when you were trying to look for a role at the very beginning?
A whole new set of issues, I guess. Just because, I'd left the UK as an aspiring coach, having worked with some, in some great environments with some really top players who've gone on to have careers in the game, and I take absolutely no credit for that whatsoever. And I shifted across from sports coaching into, I still coached for a while in the UAE, but that was only a part of my role in terms of moving into sports business and sports leadership. And I enjoyed still mentoring and working with a group of staff, but I'd shifted away from being on the pitch all of the time and really enjoyed that and considered myself still to have outstanding coaching experience and pedigree in that sense, but that I wasn't a coach anymore. I had shifted across to becoming a leader, if you like, and did my master's degree as part of my transition back, having known I'd been over a decade in an immature market, that I was going to face challenges of how that was perceived by potential organisations I was trying to break into when I got back, despite my previous experience in the UK in the sector at a pretty decent level, but albeit in a coaching context. And sure enough, I packed my bags, put my life into a rather large container, and back I came without a job. So I backed myself to break into a senior leadership position in the sports sector here, knowing that there were going to be challenges and having no idea how long it would take. And I felt I had, my USP, I felt, if you like, was that I had a real mixed bag of experiences and contexts and lenses that I'd been able to work in and look through. So, my coaching experience was there. So I can look through the lens as a coach, being in the football side of things, but I'd been a business leader, etc. I had a strong academic profile in terms of the two degrees that I had. So I backed myself, and I was confident and had that belief. And it took me 10 months, and I was fortunate that the UAE had meant I was in a position where I didn't need to put food on the table immediately, right? But I also wasn't swimming in money either. I came home and I lived with my family, which, having been away from them for 11 years, was actually lovely most of the time. And then set about trying to find that senior leadership role. And I got close. I came second quite a few times. Could have ended up in various places across the UK, some that I hadn't heard of or knew where they were. And in the end, it took, I think, a willingness to see beyond, he's been out of the country, or, he hasn't got charity sector experience in the UK. Well, don't look at what I don't have, look at what I do have. And actually, as I was saying earlier, the opportunities afforded to me in the UAE through hard work and work ethic and attitude and willingness, etc., I think I had 20 years experience over there in 10 years. And I'd shown my ability to learn in other aspects of my profile. But someone on the interview panel had a son who was out in the Middle East. So he had a little bit of knowledge about the challenges and the development that someone could have in that part of the world. And that, I think, was a barrier broken, if you like. And sure enough, I managed to succeed and get the job. I mean, even here, and again, this would highlight it, quite a few trustees on my board, and hopefully they'll maybe listen or maybe not listen to this, didn't even have me on the first shortlist because of some of those initial perceptions, right? But because I'd got close a couple of times, I then had a recruitment sort of agent on my side who'd seen, what I could do. So he backed me. I had a pre-conversation with the chair of the board, as well as the person already in the position, had managed to impress the chair. The chair saw the shortlist and said, and they were like, some of the things I've said. And he said, he's my wild card. I want him there. And funnily enough, 2 stages later, I got the job. So he was vindicated.
Good. And look, again, we've had guests on previously that is very much in favour of that wildcard approach as well, making sure there is somebody that isn't the norm in inverted commas. And I think, you picked up on a lot of things there that I think people will resonate with. And certainly now, whether it is coming from a developing nation, obviously UAE is a lot more developed now than it was 10 years ago, but it's still not quite I think UK and European sport like to put themselves on a bit of a pedestal, to be honest, but it's catching up. Saudi is going to be the next frontier where you get lots of people going out in junior roles with giving lots of responsibility and coming back and looking for slightly more senior leadership style roles. And it's really interesting to hear the approach that you took, but also the challenges that you faced. Now, in terms of, you say you had a recruitment agent on your side, how much use did you find from the kind of more traditional recruitment agency perspective, bar this person that was on your side and did a good job? And actually, were the barriers more with the companies, the hiring companies, the teams, or the charities themselves, rather than necessarily with a recruitment consultant that was, great experience, but not what we're looking for type thing? Was it a bit of a mix of both, or was it a bit more organisational led rather than recruitment led? And similarly, on top of that, when you did get down to those kind of final stages, what was the feedback like, and how was that given back to you in terms of your learning for the next potential opportunity?
Yeah. Where to start on that question? I would again just tie into the word mixed and inconsistent, which is probably my biggest frustration, but also my biggest help moving forward in terms of my own recruitment. I recruited in the UAE quite consistently for a number of years, learnt a lot through that experience. My frustration, again, obviously I was unemployed when I got back. I was enjoying some family time, read a lot of books, did some more courses, continued my development, because I felt, and I'd mapped it out, that had I been consumed with trying to find that role and, spent 9-10 hours every day, like scrolling job sites, trying to network and communicate, that I think I would have gone crazy. So I was I felt deliberate in that I was going to spend 3 or 4 hours a day. And there might even be some days where I won't. But as long as every week that I was progressing and moving forwards and learning, I remained steadfast in my belief that I would secure the level of role I was after. But obviously through that period, I was in touch with a number of different recruitment agents, some high profile, significant names, some very executive who, but I felt I knew my value, I knew my worth. I wanted a senior leadership role and I was worthy of that, right? So I wasn't willing to just take any job and start back sort of low down the ladder again. I knew what I could bring, so it wasn't the next job, it was the right job. So, and there were some I didn't get given the time of day. I had some great conversations with, but never heard from them again. There were some who would send sort of those polite short responses that are nice but don't really get you anywhere. And what I came to sort of learn, I think, eventually, that it is about relationships and developing those strong relationships. And it doesn't have to be loads. You just need 1 or 2 with the right people who can then back you and open the right door to another conversation with someone who will recognise the things that you're bringing to the table. And I mean, in terms of feedback from the organisations, again, just really mixed. I mean, I went to a final stage interview for a chief exec role at a club. I won't name them, even though I probably should or could. I felt, again, and I'm particularly conscientious with my presentations. I put a lot into them. I think I have quite a good eye for detail. So I do put a lot of work into them. Delivered this presentation, felt it went well, didn't get the role, and I literally got a 2-line email, and I replied again, sort of courteously requesting a little bit more feedback, considering it was a second stage interview, and I got told the whole interview panel were now on annual leave on holiday, and they'll ask when they get back. And in the end, I thought, if that's how they treat a candidate who's gone through their process and got to that stage, I wouldn't want to work for that organisation anyway. So I didn't pursue that feedback. But again, all of this has just then informed my own recruitment practices moving forwards, to be transparent with people, tell people the information that they want, salaries, not just salaries, but why does it have to be, salaries dependent on qualifications and experience? And well, that's such a vague statement. What value do you place on certain experience? Just tell people this is the range. But I'm the same the other way. Then when I've had people try to negotiate higher salaries, I've been steadfast and said, look, what I've tried to do is be transparent with my roles and told you what we can afford. That is what we can afford. That is in the budget. I've wasted no one's time by putting the figure lower so that you can ask for more. I've told you what we can pay, and they've turned down the role because we weren't willing to pay more. And in the end, that's fine if that's their decision. But what I've tried to be is really transparent. I'll try to communicate with everyone. It frustrates me too when you get unfortunately, we'll only be able to be in touch with shortlisted candidates. Well, why? You can send a courteous, perhaps not personal, but an email to thousands of people at the click of a button. So why can't you send something to all applicants? I just think there's just some basic human principles to recruitment that aren't readily evident, is my honest opinion.
Yeah, and I think candidate experience is such an emotional journey for the candidate that, you said yourself, spending 3 or 4 hours a day looking at potential opportunities, jobs, getting to final stage interviews, not getting them, you're on a bit of an emotional roller coaster, and you get to a point, I think, where you go, I don't really want to do this anymore because I'm not getting the feedback. I don't know where I'm going wrong, and everyone is looking to improve, and everyone's looking to where they learn. And so I think it's really interesting to hear from kind of your side that it happens at every level, which is unfortunate in one aspect, but also ultimately, an opportunity for change. I want to kind of come back to your experiences and what you're taking forward when you're hiring. You mentioned around the transparency thing, which again, I think is absolutely critical. Everybody has in their own budgets what they can afford for a candidate. So to not put that on, I think, is a little bit of a miss, in my opinion. And it comes down to a bit of trust as well. When you're hiring, what's been the main difference between hiring in your role now or in the UK in comparison to the latter stages of when you were in the UAE? So when it had been a bit more of kind of an established presence out there.
Good question. There's undoubtedly similarities. Recruitment in my eyes is recruitment, and I use this line that it is bizarrely difficult to find good people when there are people everywhere. Everywhere you look, there's people. But it is a challenge. But I think if you put the right ingredients in place, you will find good people. But also, I think it's a question of not just expecting them to find you. That was one of my first experiences here, that I got told that, we put adverts out and we never really get many applicants. I was like, well, where do we put them? Have we used the same approach? Because to me, you keep doing the same thing, you get the same outcome. So to me, it's don't just expect good candidates to find you, go and find them. And that was probably the thing in the UAE. You do have the factor that you are a long way from my familiar market, which was where I recruited initially. And then what I found was often sort of recruits that I'd come over. I did recruitment trips over to the UK through my network that was established here. And then you'd often get people come over and go, we don't do it like this in the UK. And my first response to that is, look out the window. You see that desert over there? We're not in the UK. And so what I guess I fell in love with the country in that sense is that diversity over there is not just a hot topic. It's not flavour of the month. It's woven into the very being of the country. There's over 200 nationalities living there, in all accounts very harmoniously. And if you can't operate there with cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity, ability to work multinationally and multiculturally, then you won't operate very well there. So, I was really proud when I put the sort of succession plan in place to leave the organisation that we'd had 54% male, female. I didn't quite get to 50-50, which was what I wanted. At one point I had, I think, 14 nationalities amongst my full-time team. It did cause sometimes challenges with clashes of personality and differences of opinion, but those are great. Those bring hot, fantastic debate, more sort of well-rounded, holistic programs that you're delivering because you've got great input and insights from different ways. And just because you do it one way doesn't mean that's necessarily the right way. So I really enjoyed that aspect of life over there. And I think that was something that I brought with me that was immediately evident here, that it needed some improvement in terms of sort of the diversity on our team of staff, within the environment, some gender imbalances that needed addressing, and the other challenges that everyone knows at the moment are quite rife within the game. But sport and football has the power to make the changes positive and make them quite quickly. So we've made real progress here, and that progress continues.
And I think it's really interesting because I think it's not just necessarily about diversity in terms of gender and culture, etc. Actually, that diversity of thought where you are challenging each other and you are making sure that you're doing the right thing is absolutely critical. And I think a lot of that can come within the sports industry, but actually I think we're slightly guilty of only looking within the sports industry. And actually there's a lot of people with the right skills outside of it that can come in that can offer that diversity of thought. Have you, during your hiring processes, is that something that you've taken into consideration in terms of looking potentially outside of the traditional sports network?
Absolutely. Now, a recent great example of it, now I know it's quite a specific role, but we've just taken on a data and insights manager. And he's got a master's degree in data and advanced computer science. He looks at the world in a totally different lens and a totally different way to lots of the guys within my team. And what an amazing skill set to bring in the building, particularly for a project that we're doing that does have a heavy reliance on sort of data collection and data analysis. But he's going to have a huge influence across the entire foundation, which ultimately is a sports charity. But for me, I agree with the point you've just made that, you talk about diversity and often people immediately jump to race, when actually there's so many different kinds of diversity that for me are all worthy of consideration and of equal importance. An 18-year-old versus a 55-year-old have very different views on life and professional outlook and work. And for me, there's just such great value in getting a wide diversity amongst your team in so many different forms.
No, I completely agree. Look, Mark, we have absolutely flown through that, and I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I think we could talk for a lot longer, but I'm conscious of your time. And so we've got to the point where we ask our 3 quick-fire questions. Now, I think we've covered a couple of these already, but let's try and limit these to one word or one sentence answers.
They might not be quick with me, Dan.
I
like to talk, as you can tell.
There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, let's start with most frustrating thing about recruitment.
The inconsistencies.
Nice. Your best hire and why? And you don't have to name them, but more than happy to if you want to.
That's a difficult one to try and keep short. The business. So when I went to the UAE, I originally went to work for a football club. I had a 6-month internship on how not to run a business. When I then went to the new business, I brought someone with me, a lady named Claire, who I think had just, again, not been treated very well. I think had so much unrealised potential, which I could see, not to mention she was just a wonderful human being. Brought her across, someone else was after her, but I managed to bring her over, and we essentially built the business together and became really great dear friends. She's still a dear friend of mine. So I'd have to say she was my best hire.
Excellent. Good answer. And final one thing you would change about the recruitment world?
A degree of uniformity across sectors. So if you go for a role within a sector at one organisation that is in the north of the country, and then you go for a role with a similar organisation 300 miles away, the processes are similar for both, I think, the organisation and the candidate, because the level of inconsistencies for me are detrimental to both in the end. And I think good people and good organisations would more readily find each other if there was a little bit more consistency in the recruitment processes.
Great, brilliant. Thanks, Mark, again for your time. It's hugely appreciated, and I know there's a huge amount that people can take away from this chat. So thanks very much for coming on Talent Talks, and look forward to chatting again soon, because I want to carry on this conversation.
Pleasure, Dan. Thanks for the invite.
Bye.